So moving on to a player debate here. We got two City assets, KDB and Sterling, both priced at 11.5 mil. A lot of debate this past week or this week about which one to pick because a lot of people are doing Alba to a City asset this week. So yeah, I personally have KDB. Taz, I know you have KDB as well, and Gasch, you have KDB. C4, you're the one with Sterling, so I'll let you start. Why don't you give us some insight into why you went with Sterling over KDB?
So I knew going into the season before game week 1 that this would be the week I bring in. Well, Sterling, I knew Alba to any City asset would have been the move. And from my looking at numbers and research, I wanted Sterling. And when you look into, for me, the reason was when you look into his post restart numbers last year in comparison to KDB per 90 minutes, he averaged 10.2 points per 90 and expected points of 8.42. When you compare that to Sterling, he was at 12.17 points per 90, and he had an expected points of 8.78. So I feel like it's a good differential to have long term, but also now if you're starting to look at City, like midfielders going down like butterflies, but you have Bernardo Silva out, and then you have Goodwin out. It's kind of unpredictable of where does Pep have to use KDB now. Like, will he stick in that 10 or does he have to move further back? Also, prior to this week, I was reading a thread on if you look at Sterling's production with Jesus as City's main striker versus Aguero, it's a lot higher, like considerably.
It's a lot higher with Jesus.
Yeah. So with Aguero being out, I think now it's for a minimum like another month. I feel like it's a good move to have him in the lineup.
Interesting. So it's not a full season move for you. It's just right now because of.
I think it'll be a full season move. Like I think he'll be my set and forget City asset. But I think in the short term, it also makes sense.
I think KDB's outscored him each of the last 2 or 3 seasons, though. What makes you think it's going to be different this time around?
I don't think he's outscored him the last 2 or 3 seasons. I think it was only the last one, but that's a different conversation for another day.
I think I meant to say 2 out of the last 3. I think is the correct.
Well, I'll just say that my prediction going into the year was that Sterling's going to be the highest scoring FPL player, and I still feel good about that.
Yeah, you have been talking about him since day one, so I'll give you that. Gash, why don't you tell us about why you have KDB?
Yeah, so I was, I think I was closer in this KDB versus Sterling debate now than I thought it would be before the season. I could see the merits of owning Sterling. My reason for picking KDB is that I think he's a much more consistent player. Sterling tends to be a lot streakier in terms of when he's hitting form, he's really scoring a good amount of goals. But even then, it's not necessarily like a goal per game ish. He's the type of player who will score a brace or a hat trick and then blank for the next 2 game weeks. So he seems like a much more frustrating player to own. I think KDB is really just again the consistency. And also, C4 kind of touched on it. We saw KDB playing as like a number 10 against Wolves in their first game of the season, opposed to his normal like center mid role. He was playing further up the pitch. And I think that's probably not going to continue. He made a comment himself about how he's pretty sure Pep only did that because Wolves play a back 3. With most teams in the Premier League playing a back 4, it's not something to really count on, I don't think. But also, as C4 also touched on, there's the consideration of C4 of City's players being out with a couple of injuries, so maybe it's something where he will stick there for the foreseeable future as a necessity. And then Sterling, I did see the same thing about Sterling with Jesus versus with Aguero. So I think what I would say about Sterling is that if there's a time to own him, it's probably now before Aguero comes back and is firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, so maybe take Sterling for now and then switch to KDB later. I could see that. But Taz, what do you think?
Kind of the same page with Gash in terms of KDB being the more consistent player and Sterling just being more kind of like a streaky player. He'll be hot 1 game and then not return any points. KDB always gets racks up those assists. Even in this game, we saw him playing a number 10 role. He was the most, almost like the whole City offense went through him kind of. He had the most touches in the opponent's third. as well as in the box from City, and he took the most shots for City, 4, and all 4 being on target. He did take the penalty for them, so that kind of another reason why I would prefer to own him over Sterling. I feel like Sterling is a great differential pick if you want to go for a differential pick right now. But I think KDB is more of a consistent and more of like a solid player in my opinion that I can easily, I'm captain him even against Leicester, and that's something we can get on about later on. But my goal is KDB.
When Sterling's on, he looks like he could be in the conversation for best player in the Prem, but the problem is he's not on all the time. I'm also going with KDB. I also want that consistency week in, week out, give him the armband most of the time. Maybe not most of the time, but probably like half the time. I just feel like it's a more solid and I feel like there's a slightly lower risk that he gets subbed out or rotated than Sterling. I mean, Sterling's pretty nailed as well, but like he has a slight chance to get affected by the Pep rotation wheel, in my opinion. All right, any final points? Good.
I looked it up. In the last 3 seasons, KDB's only outscored Sterling once.
Really?
I think wow. He may have had a higher points per game. Maybe was it 2 years ago when he had his long injury? So maybe that's what you were thinking of.
Maybe, yeah.